What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and it is NFL Scouting Combine Week. Joe Schoen met with reporters today and dropped a whole bunch of draft nuggets for the New York Giants and discuss kind of some of their plans. Obviously, a lot of this has to be smoke screens. He's not going to tell everybody exactly what he's going to do, but he did provide some insight on the Giants' process here as they gear up for free agency and, of course, ultimately the 2024 NFL Draft. He had some comments about Saquon Barkley, about Xavier McKinney, about Daniel Jones, about the other quarterbacks in this draft class, and really about building through the draft and supplementing through free agency. A lot of great information from Joe Schoen in today's episode. That's what we're going to be breaking down. But before we do so, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And the first thing that I want to discuss with you is what Joe Schoen said about Daniel Jones. He said, quote, "I have faith in Daniel Jones as our starting quarterback," end quote. He was also called in from one of the callers on Giants Huddle podcast, whatever it is, with John Schmelk. And honestly, go watch that clip if you haven't seen it. It was hilarious. This guy called in just really angry, ripped into Daniel Jones for like 2 straight minutes, and then was like, "Joe Schoen, what the hell do you see in this guy?" But Joe Schoen just calmly kind of responded, was like, "Oh, thanks for your question," and discussed, there's been a lot of bad performances for Daniel Jones, but he still has faith that he has the tools and the traits to make it as an NFL quarterback, and he wants to stand by him. I just want to know, Alex, your overall reaction, because obviously Joe Schoen has been asked about Daniel Jones several times already here at the Combine. He's going to continue to be asked about Daniel Jones at the Combine, and then, of course, asked about other quarterbacks at the Combine. So what are your overall thoughts and feelings about what Joe Schoen has said about Daniel Jones so far?
Well, I think he's saying all the right things. What is he supposed to say? Yeah, Daniel Jones stinks and he's not our quarterback of the future. I think everyone in this, including yourself and myself, that would agree that that's probably not going to happen. I mean, you hear what the Atlanta Falcons GM said. He said if we had a quarterback, I probably wouldn't be standing here right now. The Giants obviously protecting Daniel Jones. And look, I think the truth is simple here. If Daniel Jones was making $15 million and he was on a 1-year deal and, they can move on, they would probably be saying, yeah, we're looking into the options at quarterback. But they don't. They have him on another year at a $46 million cap hit, and then they can take an out and still have to pay $22 million in dead money. So they have to stand by this guy. They have to speak well of him. They have to protect his image. And because as a worst-case scenario, Daniel Jones running it back next year, they don't want to be stuck in a position where now Daniel Jones knows the front office is looking to replace him. So, the Giants, if the opportunity arises where they can find themselves a young quarterback that can be the future of the franchise, they'll pull the trigger. Jordan Raanan said it yesterday. The Giants are potentially thinking about moving up if the right opportunity comes across their desk. Multiple sources have told him this. This is not just Jordan Raanan, guys. This is like 40 different NFL analysts have said this. Daniel Jeremiah hinted at it. How many more people could possibly have to say it before we wrap our heads around the idea that the Giants, if there's a chance to do it, will probably pull the trigger to move up in the draft to get a quarterback, or maybe take one at 6 if one drops. So, at the current juncture, I do believe that the Giants are saying all the right things, doing all the right stuff. They're protecting their image, protecting Daniel Jones. This is classic. This is MO stuff. This is face value stuff. This is draft stuff. This is the stuff you don't take any actual value in, because the team is saying it. They don't want to give away any plans of theirs. So, I appreciate the fact that they're protecting Daniel Jones' image as a worst-case scenario if he does run it back next year. And that fan that you mentioned talked to him about the Minnesota game and said, he did it in the Minnesota game, but why does everyone point to one game out of a 5-year sample size to justify Daniel Jones' upside? And Joe Schoen bounced back and said, well, we know we have a player on the roster that can do something like that. Well, my argument here is a lot of his production came on the ground. That's objectively true. You know it, I know it, everyone knows a lot of his production comes on the ground. You want to know who just tore their ACL and probably isn't going to have the same running game next year? Daniel Jones. So, the mobility, we saw Saquon Barkley take a full year to really get back to that full strength and trust his leg again. Daniel Jones is probably going to be something similar. Maybe he bounces back a little bit faster. Even Wandale took him half a season to really get his groove, and we saw him start to pick it up during the second half of the year last year, and it was really, really good for us. But, Daniel Jones has another neck injury, the ACL tear, the production's going to go down. His deep ball accuracy was horrendous during the first couple of games of last season. He's not great enough. You know what I mean? He's not great in enough games for us to keep it rolling with him, no matter what Joe Schoen says. You're not going to beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And if the ultimate goal is to win Super Bowls, which if your goal is not to win Super Bowls, you should not be a GM in the NFL. You need a player that is going to be so good that they can beat Patrick Mahomes, that they can beat Lamar Jackson in the postseason, they can beat Josh Allen in the postseason. And the truth of the matter is that Daniel Jones is not good enough to ever do that. I mean, I know he beat Lamar Jackson, and kudos to him for that one big game. The defense really stood up and dominated, and thanks to Wink Martindale knowing Lamar Jackson like the back of his hand, we had a really good chance in that one. But the truth of the matter is that Daniel Jones has to be great a lot more, and he's good occasionally. He's great once in a blue moon. It's not enough in the NFL, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. Now, the people that don't agree with that, I implore you to just look at the money. The money tells the full story, and we can save a lot of it. So, Anthony, I don't really hold much value in Joe Schoen's speech today. I don't think it means anything, and all the reporters are saying it's just BS. It's just BS. It's just talk. It's just stuff to protect the image of the franchise and their quarterback. That is it. So, that's kind of where I stand on it. But we know this already. Joe Schoen's really good at hiding, his moves and, playing his cards without, giving them away.
Yeah, I stand with you. I mean, he said, quote, "I have faith in Daniel Jones as our starting quarterback," end quote. That's the one that's going to grab the headlines. However, what else is he supposed to say? I'm in agreement with you, Alex. I mean, we see this year in and year out. Every single offseason, we see an NFL team say, "That's our starting quarterback. That's our QB1. We have complete faith in him." And then they get traded 2 months later because they draft somebody new, right? We all remember Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray, that saga with the Arizona Cardinals. And there's been other more recent examples of that. So with the New York Giants, Daniel Jones, I don't think he's going to prevent them from taking the quarterback that they want if they have the opportunity to do so. But it's also good that Joe Schoen says, hey, Daniel Jones is our starting quarterback. We have faith in him, because if that opportunity does not arise and they can't get that quarterback, they can always just fall back and say, hey, we always had faith in Daniel Jones. We said it a million times. We didn't really want a quarterback. That's just lies that you heard in the media. Even if it isn't, they now have built in a safety net for an excuse if they don't land that quarterback. So they're doing it the right way. Joe Schoen's doing the right thing, saying the right things. He also does acknowledge, though, that there are reasons to have concerns with Daniel Jones, which I appreciate. I feel like when Dave Gettleman was the general manager and he was questioned about Eli Manning or questioned about Daniel Jones, he always just kind of brushed it off and was like, I don't see these problems. I see a good player. But Joe Schoen mentions, like, yeah, the injuries, they're a little bit concerning. Like, there are injuries and there have been bad performances. Some of it's on me. Some of it's on Daniel. He's got to be better. So I appreciate the way that Joe Schoen has spoken to the media about the quarterback situation. But again, I'm not putting too much stock into just about anything that he says about the quarterback spot, because that's the most tight-lipped secret for the New York Giants. That's the one that they're going to guard with their lives. So they're going to say whatever they say about Daniel Jones, and they're going to feel whatever they feel about Daniel Jones. And those two things don't necessarily have to be the same thing. So moving on to the next topic of discussion, though, Alex, Saquon Barkley, huge topic of discussion for the New York Giants this offseason. Finally, the scouting combine is here. We know that this is the opportunity for Joe Schoen to sit down with Saquon Barkley's representatives and have their first conversations for an extension this offseason. Of course, as we know, last offseason, the extension talks, they fell through. The Giants offered Saquon Barkley reportedly a deal worth $13 million per season. I don't think he's getting that same offer this year. The New York Post reported that the Giants won't give him that same offer. Maybe he gets it elsewhere. I feel like he doesn't. But $13 million per season, quite a lot of money that Saquon Barkley ultimately turned down just to play on a revised version of the franchise tag. Saquon Barkley could get tagged again. Joe Schoen said it's not off the table. It's a possibility and a tool that they have at their disposal. Adam Schefter yesterday, however, said that they're not going to use the franchise tag, so we'll see what they decide to do. But really what I think is going to happen here, you're going to have Joe Schoen and Saquon's representatives sit in a room during the scouting combine, go over the contract and the offer that the Giants have for him, and that's probably going to be it. I don't think this is going to be a long, drawn-out process like it was last year. I think that this is going to get done rather quickly. If it does get done, either the Giants want to bring Saquon back and they're willing to pay him, or they're not willing to pay him, and he's going to go find a team that is willing to pay him. That is how this feels like to me. That it feels like it's going in that direction. But Alex, what are your thoughts on Joe Schoen, his comments about Saquon Barkley, saying that he still wants him back on this team, the door is still open, leaves the franchise tag open as a tool that they could use, despite reports saying that they can't. How are you feeling about it? Do you think that ultimately Saquon Barkley is going to sign an extension with this team?
Well, I talked about it yesterday on my solo episode, and there's a new little piece of information I think you're going to find really interesting that Joe Schoen said today. And you know what he said? He said the running back market is saturated. He said that there's plenty of running backs in this draft and free agency class. What does that tell us, right? Two of his players in the Buffalo with the Buffalo Bills are free agents Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. By the way, Singletary looked fantastic late season with the Houston Texans, and Zach Moss looked tremendous when Jonathan Taylor was out. He could sign either of those two guys at half the cost on 1-year contracts and get pretty good value out of them. Is it Saquon Barkley? No. But you're also not locking in 30 mil, 20 mil guarantee potentially on a running back that's 27 years old and headed towards the back end of his prime. Because, as we know, running back primes are a lot shorter. Now you're losing the intangible traits that Saquon brings as a leader. But maybe you go out and get a free agent that has leadership qualities, a guy that can bring that level of experience, someone that helps, keep the locker room together, knows the coaching staff, knows Brian Dable. There are guys. I don't know much about Zach Moss's personality or Devin Singletary, but they were really good last year, and they seem to be pretty good teammates. So maybe that is something that the Giants would consider. But the fact that he came out and said, and to me, this is a move. This is one of those moves that it's a message to Saquon Barkley's agents that says, yeah, the market's flush with talent. We don't need Saquon. So if you want to stay here, we're gonna have to come to a compromise, and it's gonna be in favor of our side of it. Because you don't actively go out and say when you're talking about bringing back Saquon Barkley that the market is saturated and full of good talent that you can find, right? You don't say those things. Unless you're trying to make a point that the running back position, there's plenty of talent, they don't have to spend a lot, and they can get good value out of it. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's a key piece of information that may be overlooked, but I think it's really important and maybe sending a message to Saquon's agent saying, we're not bending down to your demands. You're bending down to ours.
I think it's a big deal, and it's a good point, and that's the right negotiating tactic for Joe Schoen here, to kind of mention that running backs are a dime a dozen, and that's the argument that everybody makes. All fans make it, NFL GMs make it. The argument is that you can find running backs wherever you want to find running backs, so you don't need to pay any running back. Quarterback, it's different. You need to pay certain quarterbacks. That's how the Giants felt last year. That's why Daniel Jones got that 4-year, $160 million deal, because quarterbacks are just so hard to find. It's not a saturated market. It's a very thin market. Finding a good quarterback, they're scarce. So you have to pay the ones that you find, even if you're not 100% convinced about them. And that's what the Giants did last offseason with Daniel Jones. But with running back, it's not like that. You don't have to be convinced in a running back, because the margin of error, or the difference between a guy like a Saquon and someone a tier or 2 tiers below, that margin is not as great as it is at the quarterback position, right? Because you're talking about a top 5 quarterback versus a top 20. That's a huge difference. But a top 5 running back versus a top 20 running back, it's not the biggest difference in the world. You can get by with a top 20 quarterback. Most NFL teams, or running back rather, most NFL teams do. They sign lowly running backs in free agency, make them their starter for the season. And then the next offseason, they rinse and repeat, find a new guy and just bring him in. Other teams go ahead and draft somebody in the 5th round, make him the starter, and it works out just fine. The top teams in the NFL do that. The worst teams in the NFL, like the New York Giants for the last 10 years, invest their entire future into the running back position, and it hasn't worked out for them, and I think that it is time for a change. There are just so many running backs available this offseason, Alex. We have talked about numerous prospects that we think are mid-round draft picks. We're not even talking about the Giants investing a high pick, not even a 1st or a 2nd round pick at that position. We're talking 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. That's what we've been focusing in on, and there's talent in those rounds for the Giants to target at the running back spot. And then if you go into free agency, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, the list goes on and on. There's so many running backs available, so paying Saquon Barkley $10 to $13 million per season, honestly, it sounds irresponsible considering how large of a saturated market you really have here at the running back spot. And I think that's what Saquon Barkley and Joe Schoen are going to have to weigh here, is the options. Saquon's going to have some options. Joe Schoen's going to have some options. And ultimately what I think is going to happen, Saquon Barkley is going to hit the open market as an unrestricted free agent. He's going to negotiate with some teams, and he's going to get his highest offer possible. And if it's from the Giants, so be it. But I don't think it's going to be. I think that Joe Schoen has kind of tipped his hand here and made it clear that Saquon Barkley, re-signing him, isn't necessarily the top priority. Even though he said he wants him back, and I understand that he probably does want him back, at that price point, I don't think it's realistic. And honestly, because the market is so saturated, Joe Schoen makes such a good point, I think that Saquon Barkley is going to go into free agency, and I think he's going to struggle to find the deal that he wants from the Giants or any other team. I don't think he's going to be getting the contract extension with the amount of guaranteed money and with the high AAV that he's been seeking for the past 2 years. I just don't think that deal is out there for Barkley to find. I don't know any team, in my opinion. Maybe the Texans, maybe the Cowboys. The Cowboys, why would they pay Saquon Barkley all that money if they have Tony Pollard, an in-house talent that they could pay the same amount of money? Doesn't make much sense. Devin Singletary again with the Texans, like you mentioned, they got by with him. I just don't know if there's really a team in the market for such an expensive running back this offseason. And I feel like once again, we're going to see that position take a hit in its market value. And it sucks to say because these players are great players and they deserve to get paid. However, it's just not reasonable with such a saturated market at that position. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Giants do there. But the decision that I am more interested in and I find way more important is the Xavier McKinney decision, Alex. I think that the New York Giants need to re-sign Xavier McKinney. He's 24 years old. He's a Pro Bowl caliber player, arguably top 5 to 10 at his position. He didn't miss a single snap this past season. He's a great leader. The locker room respects him. The locker room loves him. And he's playing at the safety position, which does not take up a huge chunk of your salary cap space, even if you are the highest paid player at that position. I've gone on and on this channel about Xavier McKinney, why I think he should get the extension. But finally, we heard from Joe Schoen. He said that on Friday, they are starting their negotiations with Xavier McKinney's representatives. They have not started yet. So we were speculating last week. There were some tweets from Xavier McKinney, and we kind of heard some rumors. It sounded like the Giants had already begun those negotiations. Joe Schoen clarified, said on Friday, those negotiations began. I'm very excited for them. But he also mentioned he wants Xavier McKinney back. And there was another quote that slipped under the cracks this week, Alex, that I saw from John Mara. John Mara addressed the Xavier McKinney kind of debacle, the ATV and the Wink Martindale stuff. He addressed all of it and said it doesn't really affect our decision making in terms of his contract. John Mara said that he feels like he's a young guy who learned from that mistake and became better for it, and we still want him in our long-term plans. That's what John Mara said. So if you got ownership saying they want this guy here long-term, and now you got the front office saying they want this guy here long-term, and you got me saying they want this guy here for the long-term, the Giants want this guy here for the long term. I think Xavier McKinney is going to be their top priority over Saquon Barkley this offseason. But Alex, what are your thoughts and feelings on Xavier McKinney, what Joe Schoen had to say about him today, and really just generally speaking, that safety market and how you're feeling about McKinney getting top dollar?
Well, McKinney's going to get top dollar. That safety market is thin. It's like Antoine Winfield Jr. and McKinney. Like those are the two top guys. Both of them are going to get paid, especially because McKinney is not just a free safety. He's a strong safety. He can play slot corner. He can do everything for you. You can rush the passer from that position. There's a lot of value that McKinney brings. And for what it's worth, I don't think the Giants can afford to lose two primary leaders in one offseason. You know, their team almost fell apart during the season last year. Those two guys helped keep it together. I really don't think that they can lose both. They're going to have to probably lose one. I guess they could bring both back, but I think they lose one of them, and I think it's going to be Saquon. I think that ultimately long-term, look, and Anthony, you know, it comes to mind again, we talk about Saquon as a leader, but your quarterback should be the primary leader here. Daniel Jones should be the leader of that locker room. Saquon should not be the glue holding your offense together. It's got to be the quarterback. And if we, and I kind of just hitting me all right now, the fact that we don't even consider Daniel Jones as the glue to that team, the glue to that offense, is a massive red flag. A huge red flag. Think about all the teams that have great quarterbacks, and Josh Allen, he keeps that offense together. Mahomes keeps that offense together. Burrow keeps that offense together. Lamar keeps that offense together. But Saquon keeps our offense together? Huge red flag, massive problem, cannot continue, must stop now. You know, you're paying your quarterback $40 million. He's got to be the vocal leader. He's got to be the one that carries the load here. And I think that, you know, some people will say, well, Eli Manning didn't do that. Guys, Eli Manning was a winner. Eli Manning showed by example. Eli Manning won 2 Super Bowls. People followed Eli Manning because he woke up every day and exuded excellence, you know, and exuded winning in the playoffs. I can't say the same thing about DJ. And look, DJ's a good dude. I don't have anything against him. I wish he panned out. We were fans of him for a long time. We prayed to the good football gods he would become the quarterback we needed him to be. But unfortunately now we're staring at a 6th overall pick that could lead to the future. And for what it's worth, Joe Schoen said something specific. I want to get your take on this too. You know, aside from the Xavier McKinney thing, you know my take on it. Gotta extend him. He's a linchpin piece. We cannot afford to continue losing more pieces, losing more great pieces. And especially transitioning to a new defense, gonna need him in that secondary. We barely have any money invested in the secondary. That's one of the few pieces we have to invest in. You know, in terms of what Joe Schoen said about the draft, he said we want to continue building through the draft and supplementing in free agency. That's a long-term mentality, right? Building through the draft is a long-term mentality. You want to know what fits long-term mentalities when it comes to building through the draft? Drafting quarterbacks and opening up that rookie window. The Giants have a lot of holes in the roster. They know that. They've acknowledged it. But they also had a pretty decent free agency last year. Aside from Paris Campbell, Bobby Okereke was an absolute home run. A'Shawn Robinson, Nacho, solid players. If they have a good free agency, draft a quarterback. My hot take is that we'll make the playoffs next year. If we draft a quarterback that like Caleb or May or Jaden Daniels, my hot take right now is that we make we make a wild card. We're a wild card team next year. I think that we were a couple of plays away this past season from being a wild card team without Daniel Jones. If you get a player, any of those three quarterbacks, in my opinion, is better than Daniel Jones on day one, I think we make the postseason. Maybe that's a hot take. I'll get your take on that, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think that some of those guys will be better than DJ coming off an ACL. Think about the context, though. DJ coming off an ACL tear with a neck injury, one neck injury away from his career ending, all these things, rotating pieces. I really do think that a young passer with a clean bill of health and, bright future ahead of him may be the way to go in terms of increasing our probability of making the postseason.
Yeah, really, I've given my take on this before. I've just kind of done it in a different roundabout way by saying that the New York Giants in 2023 were not that far away from making the playoffs. They were 3 plays away, and a quarterback was the difference on all 3 of those plays. And really, I think any of those 3 rookie quarterbacks that you just mentioned, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, or Drake May, they have the talent to make those 3 plays, which is why I've been advocating so hard for the Giants to go after that quarterback. Now, I'm not saying that the Giants are a quarterback away. They're not a quarterback away from being contending Super Bowl. They're not that. They're not going to contend for Super Bowl 2024. No quarterback is stepping in and making them Super Bowl contenders unless it's Jesus Christ himself, right? But what they were in 2023 was 3 plays away from the playoffs. You have Buffalo, Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, whatever it was, 1-yard line. Tyrod Taylor messes it up. They don't score the touchdown. They lose that game. Okay, now fast forward against the New York Jets. Tyrod Taylor gets knocked out of that game. Tommy DeVito goes in. It's a game that the Giants have a stronghold on. There's no way that they should have lost that game. However, they refused to let Tommy DeVito throw the football past the line of scrimmage. Ultimately, it sunk them. Had they had a quarterback that was good, could throw the ball forward, and could get them first downs at that point in the game, they would have won that game. There's 2 games, and it really is a difference between 2 plays. There was a 3rd down in that Jets game. If they convert, they win. Okay, now the third opportunity to make the playoffs would have been against the Los Angeles Rams to close the season. I think that was, week 17 versus the Rams, 2-point conversion attempt. Tyrod Taylor throws a wobbly duck 2 yards behind Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley can't bring it in. The Giants lose that game. 3 plays. The Giants would have had 9 wins on the season if they convert on those 3 plays. 9 wins, plus they beat Green Bay, who was the 7th seed. They would have had the tiebreaker over the Packers, and the Giants would have made the playoffs. And a quarterback was the difference. So like I said, the Giants are not a quarterback away from being Super Bowl contenders, but they are a quarterback away from being playoff contenders, a fringe playoff team. And that's a lot better than we've been able to say for the Giants for the last 6 years with Daniel Jones. We made the playoffs as a fringe playoff team in 2012, so he got that extension and he bought himself more time. But looking at the last 6 years in its entirety, Daniel Jones has not been that player for the New York Giants. That is the difference on those 3 plays. The Giants need to find the quarterback that is the difference on those 3 plays, and I think that they can find him in this year's draft class. So that's really my take on it. They're not a quarterback away. They're not going to be Super Bowl contenders in 2024. Absolutely not. But in terms of making those 3 plays and making more of those plays, more plays like that, you got to find the quarterback who makes those plays, who executes in those moments and in those dire situations and can pull you out of a tight game and make it his own game. Finding a quarterback who's got that kind of takeover ability, that's what the Giants need to find. They haven't had that since Eli Manning, and honestly, Eli Manning didn't have that towards the tail end of his career either. I mean, I think he kind of lost that ability around 2017, maybe 16 even, when they went to the playoffs. Since then, I mean, when have the Giants had a quarterback that could take over a game? Maybe you could argue Daniel Jones has done it a couple times. The Tampa Bay game, his first start of his career. Maybe the Minnesota game, you want to argue. The Saints game that he played really well in. But it's not like I'm just listing games and like have so many that I'm forgetting off the list. It's kind of difficult to find those Daniel Jones takeover games that he willed the team to victory in. It's really tough to find those. And I think that it's really tough to find games where Patrick Mahomes hasn't done that, where Josh Allen hasn't done that. Meanwhile, it's hard to find games where Daniel Jones has done that. And that's kind of the difference here. And that's what I want the New York Giants to do, is go into this offseason, find a quarterback that is the difference, that makes those plays, takes over games, wins the games for his team. They're not going to have that with Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor or any lowly backup. I love Tommy DeVito as a guy, but as a football player, I mean, he's not going to be that guy for them either. They need to go out there and find that dynamic rookie quarterback for Brian Dable to finally develop, make his own, and turn into that fire starter for the New York Giants. That's how I feel about it. So that's really my take. You ask me what is my take on it? I don't think that the Giants are that far off. So if you think that they could go in to 2024 with a rookie quarterback and make the playoffs, I don't necessarily disagree with you, because this is still very similar to the good roster that they had in 2022 that made the playoffs, but quarterback inconsistency caught up with them in 2023. That's why they missed the playoffs. In 2024, if you find that consistency at quarterback and if you improve that quarterback position, absolutely, I think that this team should still be a playoff team.
Yeah, I think you're right. And look, the truth is right now is that a lot of people will have said it in recent conversations that I've had, that the Giants don't have a great roster, and I would agree to a certain degree. It's not the Carolina Panthers, my friends. You know, we have a bona fide star at left tackle. We have a bona fide superstar at defensive interior in Dexter Lawrence. We have a very nice crop of young talent. Deontay Banks, you know, if you keep Xavier McKinney, Jason Pinnock, Bobby Okereke is a stud. You know, you look at some of the other players on this team that have a lot of upside, you know, that we haven't even seen really tap their potential yet. Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. We misused, in my opinion, Daniel Bellinger significantly last year. There are guys on this roster that are very solid, and, you know, not to mention John Michael Schmitz too. I like where this team is going in terms of the talent that we have and the young talent that we have. The coaching last year was suspect to a degree. And one thing that I think you'll appreciate is, Joe Schoen, that Shane Bowen's defense is going to be all about attacking, rushing the passer. That promotes a much better version of Kayvon Thibodeau. Much better. Not just a little bit better, a much better version, which I'm very excited to see, because you don't spend the 5th overall pick on Kayvon Thibodeau to not use him the way he was supposed to be used. We're going to see Kayvon Thibodeau probably be a much more effective and productive player in 2024. That's my take right now, just based on the defensive scheme alone. So I don't think this team is as bad as many people seem to think it is. I think that, yes, we have holes in the roster. We need a quarterback, the most important, which is what dampens all the rest of it. We need a CB2. We need another pass rusher. We need offensive line support. These are big needs. I'm not ignoring that fact, but I also think we have a couple of really good linchpin pieces, and bad teams don't have a couple of players on their rosters that are some of the best in football, right? Great teams don't have Andrew Thomas's or Dexter Lawrence, or rather bad teams don't have Dexter Lawrence's or Andrew Thomas's on their roster. They don't have Deontay Banks's on their roster. They don't have Wan'Dale's on their roster. They don't have Kayvon's on their roster. They have bad teams overall. You can build around some of these key pieces, and I think the Giants are developing some of their talent. We're going to see a big step forward next year from some of these players. Maintaining excellence from others, staying healthy is imperative. So yes, we're not the best roster in football by any means, but I would be surprised if a quarterback, you go get your quarterback and he plays well, this team, exceeds some expectations. You know what I mean? We're not that far off from being a competent team. We're not a Super Bowl winning team, but we're not far off from being competent. And I think we're just a good quarterback away from that, like many teams are, for what it's worth, not just the Giants. So that's kind of my take on that. You find the quarterback. I think what we could see is, if they manage to get the CJ Stroud effect, we could see a much better Giants team in 2024. But again, very hard to accomplish, not easy. But if you find a guy and you have a chance to get the guy that you think could be that level of talent, could elevate your franchise, you pull the freaking trigger, because this is a very good draft class. And if you don't get one of those top elite prospects, you may not have a chance for a couple years, and the Giants cannot wait. Joe Schoen can't wait a couple years to get his guy.
Yeah, and I'll even acknowledge, maybe the Giants get the CJ Stroud effect. Maybe they get the Bryce Young effect. Maybe this team is further off than we realize, and maybe they have a disastrous 2024 season, and maybe they don't even have a first-round pick to make up for it in 2025, and they find themselves in the same situation as the Carolina Panthers. But for me personally, I'd rather take the chance. Try to find the CJ Stroud rather than sit on your hands and wait for Daniel Jones to become that guy. It's been a long time of waiting. He's coming off of the ACL tear. He's had neck surgery. He's had multiple injuries to his ankles, concussions. He's always banged up and he's never playing at his highest level. And yes, there are a lot of factors that hold him back from that. The Giants need to give him more talent. They need to improve the offensive line. I understand all that. So many offensive coordinators have changed. But why not just wipe the slate clean and start over with a new quarterback that you can hopefully have completely healthy, with one coaching staff for a long time, with a set of playmakers built in for him? That's what I'm hoping to see from the New York Giants, and it sounds to me like that's what they're hoping to make happen this offseason. However, they're picking number 6 overall, so it might end up being Daniel Jones' show once again in 2024, and we are going to have to prepare for that possibility as well. But it is going to be interesting. The Combine, this is the start of the event. You've got all the GMs speaking to reporters, but the event's about to really heat up in the next couple of days. Once the drills begin, once we see who are the Giants interviewing, who are they meeting with, which prospects are they keeping a close eye on at the Scouting Combine, and of course, that's all the fun stuff that we're going to be updating you on right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.